The 1970s, a decade of disco, bell-bottoms, wood-paneled everything, and a time when advanced electronics finally started making their way into the average household. Amid the lava lamps, shag carpets, and the rise of home entertainment, a brand new form of technology sparked a revolution, one that would change how we play forever. This is the story of the very first home video game consoles, the machines that laid the foundation for an entire industry. From simple circuitry and analog switches to the first programmable systems, this is where gaming history truly begins. Welcome to the complete history of 1970s video game consoles.
Magnavox presents Odyssey, the electronic game of the future. Odyssey easily attaches to any brand TV, black and white or color, to create a closed-circuit electronic playground. Odyssey gives you all the exciting action of hockey and 11 other challenging play and learning games for the entire family. Odyssey, a new dimension for your television, now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
The story of the Magnavox Odyssey starts in the 1950s. Ralph Baer was working for Loral Electronics, a military contractor. He had been tasked with engineering a new television set. While in the design phase, he thought of adding something extra to the TV. He wanted the customer to not only watch what was being broadcast over the air, but to be able to control games on the TV as well. Loral passed on the idea, and it was mostly forgotten until the 1960s. In 1966, Baer was working for Sanders Associates, another military contractor. While waiting for a bus one day, he remembered the idea he had back in the 50s. He had also seen Tennis for Two back in the late 50s, which was a game created by William Higginbotham at the Brookhaven National Laboratory using the fundamentals of trajectory and wind resistance from military programs to create a tennis game. The next day, he wrote a 4-page proposal for a game box that would connect to a TV at a sale price of $25. In the proposal, he said it would tune into a channel just like you do to watch TV. He referred to this channel as LP, or Let's Play. Because Sanders Associates was a military contractor, he chose a small room and picked one of his technicians, Bob Trimley, to work on it and get it ready to present to his bosses at Sanders Associates. By December of '66, they had completed the first design called the TV Game No. 1. It had a very simple design in which you could move a vertical line on the screen. He showed this to the director of R&D, Herbert Campman, which initially didn't want to fund this, but agreed to due to the possible military applications, and gave them $2,000 for labor and $500 for materials to develop the project. Baer worked on the project, designed more prototypes, and by February of '67, he assigned another technician, Bill Harrison, the task of building it. During this time, Baer worked with another engineer, Bill Rausch, on making the games for the device. He developed the first games for the system, including a 2-player game where the players competed to fill buckets of water, the first button masher. Other games, such as one where 2 players are dots on the screen and try to chase and tag each other, and another that used a light gun where you had to shoot a dot on the screen controlled by the other player. Baer showed this design to Campman, and he really enjoyed the light gun game. Advised Baer to show the device to senior project management. He showed the device to the board, but most were uninterested in it as it really didn't have any military uses. Despite this, CEO Roden Sanders approved the project to be developed as a commercial product with the aim of either selling it or licensing it. By August of '67, Baer had realized that his goal of $25 per unit would not be obtainable due to the cost of the components. He also was having a hard time developing good games for the system. This is when they brought on Bill Rausch again, as he had helped develop the first few games for the system. Rausch had made it possible to have another spot on the screen, this one being computer controlled. This was made into a ping pong type game where it had 2 players that controlled the spots and a computer controlled one, being the ball. Also at this time, they decided to sell the rights to the system as Sanders & Associates was not in the consumer market. This prototype was shown to Teleprompter, a cable TV provider. They were interested in the product, but due to fiscal issues that hit the company, they backed out of the deal. In April of '68, Sanders and Associates also hit some hard times. The project was put on hold after a fifth prototype was created, and mass layoffs came to the company. At this time, Rouse was let go. Work started on the project again, and 2 more prototypes were made, the 7th being named the Brown Box. It got its name due to the wood grain stickers on the sides of the case. Bear had shown the product to several TV companies to try to get a buyer.
I think we ought to move right on now to the first of our 3 scenarios, the TV gaming. And hopefully we'll have some fun here. And if you'll all gather around, we will play a game of ping pong together. Well, here we are, playing ping pong when we ought to be working. Here's our ball, volleying back and forth. 1 free ball, plus 1 net, courtesy of the local CATV station. Here's my partner, Bill, and I. We're going to play ping pong for you in a minute. But before we do, I'd like to show you the controls that we're using, which are part of the plug-in module, the ping pong plug-in module, gaming plug-in module of the all-purpose box we talked about earlier. There is a horizontal knob here, as you can see, which, when I twiddle it, moves my paddle from left to right. There's a vertical control, which moves my paddle up and down. Finally, there's an English knob, which allows me to put curves on the ball, control the vertical position of the ball as it leaves my paddle. Whenever I intercept the ball, if I don't miss it, and bat it back at my opponent, I have control over the ball's vertical position, and that's what the English knob is for. And watch me fake him out in a minute. There's another control here, a serve knob, which puts the ball into play, serves it from my side if it's out of play, on my position, if it should go out of play. In Bill's position, he's got the same kind of a button right here. He pushes it, and the ball comes in from that side. Ready?
It's on your side.
It's on my side? Okay, let's go. Let me move away from the net a bit. Here we go. A 1, a 2, a 3, and down I go. And up I go, and down I go. Now watch me take him up. I didn't do it. I did it this time. Okay. Whoops. 1, 2. You want to score, Bill?
Sure.
Okay, 1-0. Here we go. Up and down and up. He's getting tricky. Missed it. 1 up. Keep it on the table, Bear. Here we go. Fake you out again. 2 to 1. We'll play up to 5. Huh? Good show. Get closer to the net. Make it a little faster. Up. 2 up. Missed it again. 3 to 2. I guess that makes it count of 5. Huh? Okay. Who else would like to play? Why don't you come on and play the game against my evil partner here, Richard?
RCA was interested in the product, but an agreement could not be reached and the deal didn't go through. About this time, Bill Enders left RCA for Magnavox. Magnavox had seen the console before but declined to buy it. Enders convinced them to take another look at it in July of '69. The executives at Magnavox still weren't impressed with the product, but Vice President of Magnavox Console Product Planning, Jerry Martin, by the way, console meaning console TVs, liked the idea and agreed to produce the console. This might be where the origin of the Monkeyer video game console came from. Negotiations went on for a couple years and they finally signed a deal in January of 1971. George Kenton of Magnavox turned the prototype into a final product that was sold to consumers. He had designed the case and re-engineered the internal components of the system. To save costs, they took away the color display and made it black and white. They also got rid of all the controllers except for the 3-dial analog controller. Also, instead of using a dial on the console to select games, they came up with the games card that would be inserted into the machine to select the game you wanted to play. They also decided to go with DTL logic instead of ICs to save cost. At the time, ICs were still more expensive than individual components. Magnavox first named the console Skillovision, but by its release it was renamed the Odyssey. The rifle was to be sold as an add-on for the system with the rifle game card Shooting Gallery. They also included board-type games to the product to enhance the games themselves. Bear was not a fan of the board game pieces, such as the dice, chips, cards, and plastic overlays, but Magnavox now owned the rights and felt this added to the games. With the new additions, it raised the price of the console up to $99 per unit. The console was unveiled during playtests in LA and Grand Rapids, Michigan, and demoed to dealers in Las Vegas in May of 1972. The console was publicly unveiled at the Tavern of Green in New York on May 22, 1972, which Magnavox announced the launch date of September of 72. This was the day that Nolan Bushnell saw the Odyssey and came up with the idea of Pong. The sales would be restricted to just 18 dealers in major metropolitan areas. It was demonstrated for the next few months at dealers until the launch. The Odyssey launched in mid-September of 1972 with an initial order of 50,000 units until manufacturing ramped up. All the consoles would be sold at Magnavox dealers. Eventually, between 120 to 140,000 units were produced in 1972, but only 69,000 units were sold. Bear thought this was due to the high price of the unit, but as it turns out, people were confused about the console. Seeing it was only sold at Magnavox dealers, they thought it only worked with Magnavox TVs. Due to low sales, Magnavox thought about discontinuing the product after the holiday season. To help with sales, they lowered the price of the unit to $50 with the purchase of a TV. Also, more games were made, and the light gun add-on game was sold as well. The unit started to be sold worldwide in 1973, and sales started to pick up. In late 1973, Magnavox started a large advertising campaign for the upcoming holiday season. As demand rose, they produced more consoles. By 1974, it appeared in the Sears Wish Book for sale. 1974 was the best year for sales, selling more than 129,000 units. Then in 1974, Magnavox signed a deal with Texas Instruments to use their ICs in a newly designed, cost-reduced console that would become the Odyssey dedicated console series, such as the Odyssey 100 and 200. The Magnavox Odyssey was discontinued in 1975 to make way for the newer Odyssey series of consoles. It had a 3-year lifespan from 1972 to 1975, selling more than 350,000 units in total.
I'm sure when you went out last week to play Pong, you got to having so much fun, you just plain forgot to come home. We all miss you, Doreen. But guess what? Atari, inventors of them electronic games to put the quarters in, just made Pong for home TVs. Scorekeeping and all. Pong, invented by Atari. Now at last you can play at home. Dumpling, darling, come on back home.
The story of the Pong console really starts way back in the 1950s, 1958 to be exact, when physicist William Higginbotham designed Tennis for Two, which was a computer game based on the game of tennis. Two players would go head-to-head with a ball that would bounce back and forth. So really, this was the first Pong-type game that was developed, and this was way back in the 1950s. This deserves a video all on its own. But let's fast forward a few years. In 1966, another engineer named Ralph Baer worked for a company called Sanders & Associates. It's now called BA Systems and is a military contractor. Baer came up with the idea to play games on a television set, and he thought it would be a marketable idea. And Sanders & Associates green-lighted the idea. At about the same time, 3 different young engineers were hopping onto the scene. One named Nolan Bushnell that recently graduated from the University of Utah's College of Electrical Engineering. He is one of the few students that got to play around on the digital computer mainframe and got to play the original Space War video game. He had to work his way through college and worked at the Lagoon Amusement Park in Utah. There he saw electromechanical machines, specifically Chicago Coins Speedway racing game, and it inspired him to want to create his own arcade games. Also at this time, a young engineer named Ted Danby had just gotten out the military. He had learned a ton of electrical experience while enlisted, and his first civilian job was with Bank of America to work on electrical mechanical accounting machines. Then he was hired on by Hewlett-Packard, but didn't stay there too long. Within a few weeks, he moved on to Ampex. This was in 1961. Nolan Bushnell eventually got hired on with Ampex as well, and in 1971, Ampex hired another young engineer named Alan Alcorn, who recently graduated from the University of California, Berkeley. Bushnell and Danby formed a company called Syzygy and developed a clone system of the video game Space War that they had played on the DEC mainframe in college. The prototype was developed by Danby, and Bushnell did the marketing, trying to find somebody that could manufacture it for them. They found Nutting & Associates, which was the maker of coin-op trivia games and shooting games, and decided to go with them. They fabricated the fiberglass cabinet and inserted a coin mech and the electronics. Although sales exceeded $3 million, it was still considered a commercial failure. It was at this point that Danby and Bushnell decided to rename the company due to trademark issues because Syzygy was already taken by another company. So they decided to name the company Atari. The name comes from the ancient Japanese board game named Go, and Atari is when you hit a target in a game. In 1971, they hired Alcorn from Ampex as well. Bushnell assigned Alcorn a task to create a new video game, something that Atari would distribute themselves without a third-party distributor. Bushnell really wanted a racing game to be created, but instead he wanted Alcorn's first project to be easy on him. Bushnell went to a trade show in New York and saw the Magnavox Odyssey that Bear had developed with Magnavox. Magnavox showed off the system while they were still waiting on the patent to go through. This is supposedly where Bushnell came up with the idea of Pong. He put Al Alcorn in charge of developing this new video game. After Alcorn developed the circuitry, he bought a Hitachi black and white television and put it into a cabinet they hand-built and wired it all together. They put the prototype into Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California in August of 1972, and within a week and a half, the owner of the tavern called and said that the game was having problems and wasn't working anymore. They came down expecting the circuitry or something to be broke, but the problem was, it was just jam-packed full of quarters, and Atari knew they had a success on their hands. It was at this point that Bushnell wanted to develop a system into a home video game console. This is when Atari hired engineer Harold Lee to work with Al Alcorn. They took Alcorn's design and integrated it into an IC, basically making a Pong on a chip that minimalized the circuitry and really brought the cost down to the consumer. At the time of its release, Atari's Pong on a chip was the highest performing chip used in a consumer product. Now Atari had developed a system, but they needed to find a distributor. Atari had seen that the Magnavox Odyssey had an ad in the Sears catalog, so Atari approached Sears' top executive, Tom Quinn, who really wanted the product, but Atari, believing they could get a better deal elsewhere, declined. Atari showed the console off in January of '75 at a toy fair trying to find a distributor, but this turned out to be unsuccessful. So Atari met back up with Sears and Quinn. They struck a deal that by Christmas season, Atari had to come up with 150,000 units. Although Atari didn't have the capability to produce that many units, Bushnell was able to secure funding through venture capitalist Don Valentine to build a new factory to fulfill Sears' order. The first units were branded Sears Telegames to fulfill the contract. Then Atari products were made. Now, you'd think that this would be the beginning of a great story for Atari, but at this point, in April 1974, Magnavox filed a lawsuit against Atari, along with other manufacturers of Pong clone systems. Bear and Magnavox were saying that Atari had infringed on their trademark, which had finally went through in 1973. In fact, in court, Bushnell did not deny that he had saw the Odyssey and stated, "The fact is, I absolutely did see the Odyssey game, and I did not think that it was very clever." Atari settled out of court for an approximate payment of $1.5 million made payable in 8 installments, and Magnavox obtained the rights to see full information on Atari's products publicly announced over the next year. And if history serves me correct, this is why the VCS was pushed back an additional few months before it was released, so Magnavox wouldn't get any information on it. Atari went on to sell more iterations of a Pong console, including Pong Doubles, Super Pong, and later consoles like Video Pinball. But the original Pong console that debuted in 1975 sold a little over 150,000 units. It was completely discontinued by 1978 and was the Kickstarter for Atari Incorporated.
You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco, with 3 different games. Telstar Tennis, with digital scoring, variable speeds. Telstar Hockey. Each player controls a goalie plus a forward on the other side. Oops, a goal. And Telstar Singles Handball, a game you play yourself. Telstar Handball, Tennis, Hockey. All 3 at an exciting low price. For great family fun, hitch your TV to a Telstar by Coleco.
The story of Coleco really starts in 1932. This is when Maurice Greenberg opened the Connecticut Leather Company. They started producing leather goods and leather shoe repair kits. During World War II, the demand for business grew, and so did the company. In early 1950s, Maurice Greenberg's son, Leonard Greenberg, joined the company. It was his idea to sell leather lacing and leather craft kits to children at a 1954 toy fair. Their leather moccasins kit was chosen as the Child Guidance Prestige toy, and it was at this point the Connecticut Leather Company decided to go full on with kids' toys. In 1956, Leonard Greenberg bought a technology used to vacuum form plastic, which led the company to develop several small toys made out of plastic, including wading pools. In 1961, the leather and shoe finding portion of the business was sold off, and the Connecticut Leather Company abbreviated its name to Coleco. In 1963, Coleco acquired Castrell Corporation, which was a leading manufacturer of vinyl pools and toys. After this acquisition, Coleco became the largest manufacturer of above-ground swimming pools in the world. In 1966, the company had grown so large that Leonard persuaded his brother Arnold Greensburg to join. After Arnold joined, several other toy manufacturing companies were acquired by Coleco. Coleco enjoyed success during the late 1960s in the toy manufacturing sector. In 1971, Coleco became public on the New York Stock Exchange and then acquired a snowmobile company. After the acquisition of the snowmobile company, sales were very poor in that sector. Coleco had to find a way to make money and make money fast. Right around this time, Arnold Greensburg was named CEO of the company and wanted to get into the growing video game market. Coleco in 1976 started producing the Telstar dedicated game consoles. Nearly all these dedicated systems were built around a General Instruments Pong on a chip, which there was a shortage of at the time. But since Coleco was one of the first to order, they got their entire shipment while other companies didn't. This made Coleco a leader in the dedicated game console market in the 1970s. The sales of the dedicated game consoles allowed Coleco to break even with the failing snowmobile business. Coleco was so successful with the Telstar units, they almost sold 1 million consoles. This put them in second place for the most consoles sold in the first generation.
素晴らしいボールの変化、鮮やかな9色のカラーがゲームの種類によって変わります。ラケットの大きさやボールのスピードが変えられるので、ハイテクニックなゲームが楽しめます。見るテレビから遊べるテレビへ、15種類ものゲームが楽しめるカラーテレビゲーム15、9800円のカラーテレビゲーム6もあります。
The story of Nintendo as we know it started in Kyoto, Japan in 1889. That's right, 1889. Japanese entrepreneur Fusajio Yamauchi started a company named Nintendo Karuta to produce and distribute playing cards. This was a tough business to get into at the time due to a Japanese law that was implemented in 1882 to ban gambling because of organized crime. With this ban, most playing cards were banned as well, and most companies abandoned the playing card business altogether because they didn't want to be associated with criminals. However, one type of card was still being allowed, Hanafuda, or flower cards. This made Nintendo the sole producer of these types of playing cards. At first, they made high-quality cards using expensive manufacturing processes, but later they made cheaper and more cost-efficient cards, making the business very lucrative. It wasn't until 1907 that they started making Western-style playing cards like we use today. They entered an agreement with another Japanese company, Nihoi Senbai, or better known as Japan Tobacco, to sell the cards at their cigarette stores. It was also at this time the company changed its name to Marufuku Nintendo Card Company. A few years later, in 1915, the name was changed again to Yamauchi Nintendo, but still used the Marufuku Nintendo Card Company brand on their cards. Nintendo continued to produce cards through the 1920s. In 1929, Fusajio departed the company. Due to Japanese culture, he would have to leave the company to his male child, but he did not have one. Instead, he adopted his son-in-law, Seikario Kaneda, and passed the company on to him. By this time, Nintendo was the largest and most successful playing card company in Japan. Seikario took on the surname of Yamauchi. In 1933, Seikario created a general partnership and changed the name once again to Yamauchi Nintendo Company Limited, and constructed a new company headquarters right next to the old one in Kyoto. During this time, Seikario was thinking of the future and who would head the company after him, as he did not have any male children either. His plans were to adopt his son-in-law just as he had been. But he had left his family and the company for unknown reasons. So Seikario made his grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, heir to the company when he decided to retire. Then came World War II, which brought a great financial burden onto the company as people were more concentrated on the war effort than playing games. During this time, Hiroshi's wife, Michiku, which came from a wealthy family, supported the business and kept it going. After the war, things did get better as American soldiers came to Japan and were buying and using Nintendo's playing cards. In 1947, Seikario founded a distribution company for the playing cards called Marufuku Company Limited. This is the company that directly turned into the company we all know today as Nintendo Company Limited. In 1949, Seikario had a devastating stroke, which eventually took his life, and Hiroshi became the third and longest-lasting president of Nintendo. In 1959, Nintendo formed a partnership with Disney to produce playing cards with Disney characters printed on them, bringing Nintendo into the children's market. Also in this year, they moved their company headquarters to a different part of Kyoto. In 1962, Nintendo became a publicly traded company on the Kyoto Stock Exchange. A year later, in 1963, they changed their name for the last time to what we all know, Nintendo Company Limited, and started manufacturing games as well. Sales started to slump, and by the end of 1964, Nintendo's stock fell to just 60 yen per share. In 1965, Nintendo hired Gunpei Yokoi for his expertise in manufacturing and assembly line production of electronic devices. With this experience, Yamauchi put him in charge of the games division. They restructured the company to be more related to games, but still kept the division for playing cards. That division later evolved into making Pokemon cards. This is when Nintendo started producing classic board games like chess, mahjong, shogi, and the game that inspired Atari's name, Go. In 1970, Nintendo developed its first electronic toy, the Beam Gun. This was designed by Masayuki Uemura. It was a light gun that worked with sensors in the targets, and when hit, popped up to show that it was hit. Over 1 million of these units were sold, Nintendo's first successful electronic toy. So successful, in fact, Nintendo partnered with Magnavox to create the light gun used on the very first game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, in 1971. In the early 1970s, Nintendo found success in their games and toys division, but this ended with the 1973 oil crisis. The cost of producing plastic skyrocketed. This took a toll on production costs at Nintendo, losing billions of yen. Nintendo knew they had to do something. They saw the success Magnavox was having with the Odyssey and made a licensing agreement to use their technology to create their own Pong-type console. The Color TV Game 6 launched in 1977 in Japan, being Nintendo's first video game console as well. This became a series of games such as the Color TV 15, Color TV Game 112, Computer TV Game, and Color TV Game Block Breaker. These went on to be the most successful first-gen consoles, selling more than 3 million units, outselling Atari, Magnavox, and Coleco all together. With the success of the Color TV series, Nintendo was looking ahead, investing that money into future projects such as the Game & Watch and development of their first programmable ROM cartridge video game system, the Famicom. In fact, the Color TV continued on until 1983. Sales from it and the Game & Watch, which released in 1980, fully funded the R&D for the Famicom that was released in 1983.
F, the one with all the fun. The Fairchild Video Entertainment System at your larger JCPenney. The home entertainment system that never gets old. Plug in a new video cart and change the fun. Play tic-tac-toe, shooting gallery, or just doodle. Switch video carts and play Desert Fox. Switch again, it's blackjack. Or play the 2 built-in games, Pro Hockey or Tennis Champ. Channel F for fun. The Fairchild Video Entertainment System. Just $169.95. Video cart cartridges, $19.95 each. At your larger JCPenney.
The story of the Channel F starts in the mid-1960s. An engineer named Norman Alpert was working at AMF, the maker of bowling alley equipment, in their R&D division. In fact, he was one of the ones responsible for creating the automated scoring that you have in bowling alleys nowadays. Alpert worked at AMF throughout the 1960s. In 1969, AMF moved its R&D division from Connecticut to North Carolina, and a few engineers didn't want to make the move, and Alpert was one of them. He then created his own company named Alpex Computer Corporation. When Alpex first started, their business plan originated around cash registers and had a partnership with Pitney Bowes. But because of the competition with IBM and NCR, their partnership ended in 1973. At this point, Alpex had no products and had to lay off most of its workforce except for 3 engineers, all of them being former AMF employees. Alpex knew it had to do something to stay alive. They wanted to get into the emerging video game market and saw this as being a potentially profitable market as well. With the success of the Atari Pong arcade machine and the Magnavox Odyssey home console, the time just seemed right. It was also around this time that Intel had started to produce their CPUs. First the 4004, then the 8008, and lastly the 8080 in 1974. Of the remaining engineers at Alpex, Wallace Kirshner saw the new CPU as an opportunity to run complex software on a microcomputer, giving it the capability to produce bitmap graphics. The Magnavox Odyssey used old outdated technology called DTL, or diode to transistor logic, and the Pong arcade used TTL, or transistor to transistor logic. These types of discrete logic were able to generate gameplay on the screen, but with very rudimentary graphics. Kirshner met with Albert and was given the go-ahead to start developing a video game system. Kirshner knew the system had to have good games, so they hired a software engineer named Lawrence Haskell, another former AMF employee. Kirshner would be in charge of the hardware and Haskell of the software. The two started on a project codenamed Raven, short for Remote Access Video Entertainment. The first iteration of the prototype would use the Intel 8008, but by its release in 1974, they switched over to the new Intel 8080 CPU. By using a CPU, they could now run software on it and be able to have different games that the user could switch out, but they had to come up with a way that this could be done. They looked into all different media types that they had at the time: paper tape, magnetic tape, or magnetic discs. All of these types of media were impractical due to their complexity and cost. But there was a new way to run software on a computer: programmable EEPROMs, which were actually part of Intel's 8080 dev kit. Once programmed, they were to be soldered or socketed onto the board to run the software, but that still wouldn't be practical for the consumer. Haskell and Kirshner took a trip to Radio Shack. They picked up a few small project boxes, perf board, and a few edge connectors. With these parts in hand, they created the first prototype video game cartridge by soldering the EEPROM onto the perf board, putting the project box around it, and then inserting it into the edge connector on the main board. The video game cartridge was born. With Raven's hardware almost complete, Haskell was finishing up a few games that he was designing. Tennis, which was pretty much a Pong clone. Hockey, which was like Pong, but you could move your player around the screen and control the angle of the player, move the goalie, and it had an on-screen score and time. These eventually became the built-in games on the Channel F. 3 more games were created at this time: Tic-Tac-Toe, Shooting Gallery, and Doodle. They made it onto the first cartridge for the Channel F. With the design phase being complete, Haskell and Kirshner demoed the Raven to Alpert and the Alpex board of directors. They liked the product, but did not have the capital to manufacture or market the game system. They needed to find a business partner. Just as Ralph Baer did with his brown box, they demoed the system to several TV companies such as Sylvania, Zenith, RCA, and Motorola. But none of these companies were interested in their toy. By 1975, Alpex knew they had to get the product out before the competition did. Atari had just released their Pong home console. It integrated the TTL logic into one chip. Atari was getting closer to what Alpex was doing now. Alpex then started showing the Raven prototype to semiconductor companies. A company named Fairchild, which was a camera company but also produced semiconductors, had supplied Alpex back in the day when they were making cash registers with their components. This relationship paid off. Alpex showed the Raven prototype to Fairchild's Sean Fogarty. He liked the product so much, it went straight to the CEO, Wilf Corrigan. He saw this product as the next step into their integrated circuit division. Fairchild then sent engineer Jerry Lawson out to see the Raven. He gave it the final approval and Fairchild bought the system. Since Fairchild wanted to use their own silicone, Lawson worked with Haskell and Kirshner and converted the system from the Intel 8080 CPU to Fairchild's own F8 CPU. At this point, Fairchild took over the project and assigned Lawson as project lead. They had to design a case, a cartridge slot mechanism, cartridge, and controllers for the system. At this point, the code name was changed from Raven to Stratos. Lawson hired industrial designer Nicholas Telford to design the console case, controllers, and cartridge design, which got its design inspiration from the 8-track tape. Telford then hired on Ron Smith, a mechanical engineer, to complete the design for the cartridge mechanism. Then they hired graphic artist Tom Kamafuji to draw the cartridge artwork. With everything complete, the system was debuted at the July 1976 CES show. However, only an empty shell was displayed and did not get too much attention from the crowd. They changed the name of the system again from the Stratos to the Video Entertainment System, or VES. A couple months later, the system was featured in a July 1976 article in Business Week called The Smart Machine Revolution. It showed the Channel F alongside of cars, watches, and other electronics that used a microprocessor. This got the attention of the consumer, and interest peaked. A video game system that played more than just the built-in games, with a microprocessor powering it, the first of its kind. Just before its launch, the name of the system was changed again to the Channel F, short for Channel Fun. It launched in November of 1976 in North America and October of 77 in Japan. 350,000 units were made. It had 3 cartridges at launch time. Video Cart 1, which had Tic-Tac-Toe, Shooting Gallery, Doodle, and Quadradoodle. Video Cart 2 with Desert Fox and Shooting Gallery. And Video Cart 3 with Video Blackjack. Initial sales of the system were okay for the time. Not strong, but solid. Then the Atari VCS was launched in September of 1977. With Atari's fast-paced, action-packed, and licensed arcade ports, the Channel F sales dwindled down. Fairchild needed a way to cut production costs and make improvements to the system to stay competitive. Lawson and Telsforce started work on an updated Channel F2. The upgraded design would be smaller, integrated most of the remaining logic on the motherboard, have a redesigned case, detachable controllers, and have audio coming through the RF signal instead of the internal speaker. By 1979, sales of the system plummeted. With the added competition of the Odyssey², the Intellivision, and the Astrocade, Fairchild started to look for a buyer for the Channel F. A company named Zarkon International made a deal with Fairchild and bought the rights to the Channel F. Zarkon released the upgraded system as the Channel F2 after the acquisition. Not long after this, Jerry Lawson left the company and formed his own game company named Videosoft, which made games for the Amiga, CBS, Mattel, Milton Bradley, and Parker Brothers. By late 1979 and early 1980, Zarkon wanted to expand to Europe. To do this, they licensed the Channel F2 to several companies in different countries in Europe, creating the Channel 2F clone systems, such as the Lexor Video Entertainment System in Sweden, Ataman Grandstand Video Entertainment Computer in the UK, the Saba Video Play, and the Normandy Color Teleplay from Germany. The system really didn't catch on in Europe either due to Atari's dominance. By 1982, the technology used in the system was dated. With added competition from higher-powered systems such as Coleco and the Atari 5200, the Channel F was really showing its age, and sales showed this. In 1983, Zircon discontinued the Channel F2. In total, there were 26 cartridges made for the system from 1976 to 1981, with no games being made in 1982 or 83. All of the games were developed in-house with no third-party developers. The Channel F had a 7-year lifespan from 1976 to 1983. It sold its initial 350,000 units made by Fairchild, but sales figures are scarce for Zircon and other licensed manufacturing companies in Europe, so we'll say for argument's sake it sold over 350,000 units, and was the first video game system to use programmable ROM cartridges.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home, so we got an Atari video game. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders, zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
The story of the Atari 2600 really starts in 1972 when Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney formed Atari Incorporated. During this time, Atari produced arcade game hits like Pong, but by 1974, Atari had realized they needed to get into the home video game market. At this point, Atari acquired Cyan Engineering, and with that acquisition, brought on engineers Ron Milner and Steve Mayer. Also in 1975, after the acquisition of Cyan Engineering, the two engineers, Mayer and Milner, sat down with MOS technology that was recently purchased by Commodore Incorporated. They spoke with Chuck Peddle. He advised them that they could sell them the 6502 microprocessor for a price of $25. Unfortunately for Atari, this price was still too high for the consumer market, and at this point, Mayer, Milner, and Peddle all sat down and came up with the design of the 6507 processor for Atari's use. This was a cost-reduced version of the processor which had less address lines and a smaller footprint and a smaller cost. As MOS offered the chip to Atari for a price of $12 per unit, also in the deal would be bundled in for an additional $12 per unit the MOS Riot chip, the RAM input-output timer chip. Atari struck the deal and development of the 2600 started. In late 1975, Atari hired Joe Decour to help design the graphics chip for the new console. The first prototype, which was named Stella, had the 6507 processor for the Riot chip and a breadboard version of the graphics chip known as Stella at the time, which would eventually become the television interface adapter. Now, a second version of this prototype was completed by March 1976 with the help of Miner. They actually incorporated the chip called the Television Interface Adapter, or TIA chip, into the design in 1976. Unfortunately, Atari was experiencing financial woes. By this point, due to the development of the Atari 2600, its Pong console, and its arcade divisions, Atari was millions of dollars in debt. They needed financial help at this point. Bushnell agreed to the terms for Warner Communications to purchase Atari Incorporated on June 4, 1977. The Atari VCS was debuted at the Consumer Electronics Show, and by September 1977, the Atari VCS launched at a price of $199. By 1978, Bushnell and Warner Communications were in disagreements about how the Atari 2600 should be marketed. Nolan Bushnell at this point decided to step away from Atari. Between 1978 and 1983, Warner Communications had great success with the Atari VCS or 2600 system. Unfortunately, by 1983, the video game crash occurred, and at this point, Warner was losing money at Atari and decided to sell. In 1984, Atari was sold to ex-Commodore founder Jack Tramiel. During Jack's reign at Atari, we saw the last iteration of the Atari 2600. Released in 1986, this is the one that we know as the Atari Junior. This was produced until 1992, giving Atari an amazing 15-year run.
Astrocade, the professional video game system that gives you 4-player capability, 3 built-in games, a calculator, and these new cartridges. Creative Crayon. Even the young can make beautiful pictures. The Incredible Wizard has a dungeon of surprises for you. You can even create your own games with Astrocade Basic, the easy computer teaching cartridge. Astrocade, the home entertainment sensation that's a personal computer, too.
The story of the Bally Astrocade starts in 1969. Bally acquired Midway Manufacturing, an amusement game company, and consolidated it into a company called Midway Bally. By the mid-1970s, Midway Bally wanted to get into the home video game market. They contacted Dave Nutting and Associates, an industrial design engineering firm, to design a video chip that could be used in all their planned future systems, arcade, home computer, and game consoles. Nutting created a chipset that would be used in the arcade games Gorf and Wizard of War. It provided a 320 by 204 screen resolution with 4 colors per scan line. At the time, this was considered high resolution. The only downfall was the chipset used memory that was accessed faster than the normal 2 MHz dynamic RAM of the time, having page mode addressing to write to the buffer inside the video chip to increase draw and redraw rates and to maintain a higher screen resolution. They wanted to use the same technology in a home game console, but to keep costs down, they did not use the page addressing like in the arcade. Instead, the screen resolution was capped off at 160 by 102 with 4 colors of a possible 256 per scan line. The video chip didn't support sprites, so it was purely bitmap, which was notoriously slow to draw and redraw to the screen. To pull this off, they used a blitter type system that through software was able to produce sprite-like objects. The controllers were designed with a pistol grip with the button being the trigger. There was a small thumb 8-way joystick that was placed on top that was also a paddle control and could be turned as well. The case was designed with the 70s era wood grain on the side. On the front, there was a 24-key keyboard that was used to select games and for other input features. There was also a reset and eject button on the front of the cartridge slot. The power button for the system was located in the back. By 1977, they named the system the Bally Home Library Computer. It was offered for pre-order through mail order and was supposed to be released by the Christmas season, but due to delays in production, the launch didn't happen until April of 1978, and the system's name changed again to the Bally Professional Arcade. The system was barely marketed. It was not advertised like Atari or other game systems of the time, and was really only sold in computer stores or by mail order. By 1979, Bally Midway decided to sell off their consumer products division, which included the game console. They found a buyer in Microvision Incorporated, a company that had been trying to release their own video game console but had failed up to that point. In 1981, they renamed the system once again to the Bally Computer System and included a basic cartridge with it. Back when Bally Midway owned it, they were developing an expansion unit for the system called the Z-Grass to turn it into a full-fledged computer. With a full keyboard, 32K of RAM, and a 32K ROM with the Grass programming language built in and I/O ports to connect to storage media such as floppy or tape drive, and was compatible with CP/M. Very few examples of this device exist today. In 1982, the name was changed a final time to the Astrocade. By 1983, the effect of the video game crash was starting to hit the game market. Microvision Incorporated saw the signs and discontinued the system. By 1985, the Astrocade and its software could no longer be found. In all, there were 28 games, all of which were made in-house with no third-party developers. The Bally Astrocade had a 5-year lifespan from 1978 until 1983. Sales numbers are almost non-existent, but the few articles I've read said that the system sold around 150,000 units. I don't know how accurate that is, but I'm assuming it's close due to its poor marketing. This was Midway's only venture into the console market. After this, they became a third-party developer for other console makers, making great titles such as Mortal Kombat.
Odyssey, video game fun, computer keyboard challenge, the entrance to an alternate world of fire-breathing dragons, hard-hitting sluggers, arcade wizards, outer space wizards. More than 40 games in all. Odyssey, the excitement of a game, the mind of a computer. All for the price of an ordinary video game. Odyssey.
The story of the Odyssey² starts in 1975. It was during this year that Magnavox decided to discontinue the world's very first video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. They decided to make dedicated consoles like Atari's Pong with cost-reduced integrated circuits. These were the Odyssey series of dedicated consoles such as the Magnavox Odyssey 100 and 200. Also in 1975, Magnavox was bought by Philips and became a subsidiary of Philips. In 1976, Fairchild released the Channel F, and in 1977, Atari released the VCS, or later known as the 2600. Both of these systems used a new technology to the gaming industry, replaceable programmable cartridges, meaning the system didn't just play one game, but it could play multiple games stored on individual game carts. In January of 1977, Magnavox president Alfred D. Scipio said in a January 17, 1977 Business Week article that the company would have a new microprocessor-based video game console on the market in 1977. He saw what Fairchild was doing with the Channel F and heard leaks about Atari's new console on the horizon, both of which used programmable cartridges to provide games for the consoles. He saw this as the future of video game consoles and wanted in on the market. Development of the new console was slow. They had decided to go with an Intel-powered machine, but needed help with its development. By July of 1977, things were not going well. So bad, in fact, they needed to call for some assistance. It was at this time that John Helms, lead engineer for Magnavox's video game division, contacted Sanders & Associates. He spoke with Ralph Baer, who designed the first Odyssey game system for Magnavox. By late July, Baer had sent a letter to Helms suggesting a collaboration for the new console and the amount that it would cost Magnavox. By August, a prototype was completed, but because it was taking so long and costs were increasing, Magnavox was talking about canceling the project altogether. Helms was so worried about the project being canceled, he called Baer and asked him to come to the Odyssey engineering headquarters to see the new console and get his thoughts about it. Baer obliged and spent the whole day at the headquarters. They showed him the prototype, schematics, and system specs. Baer really liked the idea of the keyboard and the possibility to turn the system into a full-fledged computer. He also attended a meeting about canceling the Odyssey² project. He spoke with Magnavox and Intel execs, and by mid-September, the project was saved and continued on. Baer quoted in his book, Video Games in the Beginning, as saying, "Almost sure I saved the program." By the end of September, Magnavox wanted Baer and Sanders & Associates to help with development of games. By December, Magnavox wanted Sanders to create a game or two for the system. Baer also met with Magnavox Games chief, Mike Sadup. They wanted Sanders to work with the programming staff at Magnavox, which consisted of 3 people, one of which was Sam Overton, to help with the development of good games. Scipio is quoted as saying in a December 26 Business Week article, "There is no sound evidence yet that a large unit market is there at the price points these products require," stating that it was not a failure on Magnavox that the console was not ready for the Christmas season of 1977. In late January of 1978, Baer requested all documentation on the new system to help make proposals for their work to be done. Also at this time, Overton says 6 games are done, but he is the only programmer left. Overton is made a coordinator between Sanders and Magnavox, as Sanders offers to take on the programming for the new system. At this point, Intel's Ed Averitt started to develop the games. In fact, Averitt made most of the games for the system. Baer started development of a pinball game for the system that users could create their own pinball playfield to play on. The project ended up costing Magnavox $50,000, and the game was never released. Now, this is where the details of the Odyssey² story get a little hazy. There are reports that the system launched in September of 1978 in the USA in limited quantities, and with a different logo, as the trademark for the logo we all know wasn't approved yet. However, I cannot confirm this information with other sources. It also is said to have been released in Europe as the Philips Video Pack G7000 in December of 1978. The system was actually more popular in Europe, but the release was eventually halted due to a defect in the power plug causing shorts. Approval for the Odyssey² trademarks had gone through as of February of 1979. This is when the system is thought to have been officially launched with its updated logos and verbiage. But for the sake of argument, I will say that the system launched in September of 1978 in the US and December of 78 in Europe. The Odyssey² was shown at the Winter CES show in January of 1979 to positive reviews. People liked the system and were impressed with the built-in keyboard. By this time, the Odyssey II was looking like it would be a success for Magnavox. However, bad omens were starting to arise. In July of 1980, Averitt demoed a game to the heads of Magnavox. It was a game much like the popular Pac-Man. It did not have a title at the time, but it would soon be called Casey Munchkin. By August of 1980, the game was approved by Magnavox to be put into production and was released in mid-1981. This was the beginning of the end for the Odyssey II. In November, a Chicago retailer named Minnesota Fats, the Video King, ran an ad about the Odyssey II and its new game, Casey Munchkin, and that it is a Pac-Man type game. This got the attention of Atari, who had a deal with Namco and Midway to be the sole distributor of Pac-Man at the time. An Atari legal secretary was sent to another Chicago retailer to buy the game, and was told by a store rep the game was just like Pac-Man. Then Atari sent investigators out to Minnesota Fat store to buy the game, only to hear the same line, "It's just like Pac-Man." At this point, Atari and Midway had enough and filed a copyright infringement suit against Magnavox, stating Casey Munchkin infringes on Pac-Man's copyright. In December of 1981, a decision was reached in the case, and it was found that Casey Munchkin was not substantially similar to Pac-Man and did not infringe on its copyright. Atari was quick to appeal. In January of 1982, Atari argued its case before the United States Court of Appeals, 7th Circuit. The trial went until March, where the decision was reversed and they stated Casey Munchkin was substantially similar to Pac-Man, and it was soon pulled off the shelves. In September of 1982, it was announced that the Odyssey II would be imported by Corten Trading Company and marketed by Kawanda Company and Tuscana Company for release in Japan. Later that month it was released, also being later released in Brazil. It was around this time that a new console, the Odyssey III, was starting to be developed. This system was released by Philips in Europe in a very limited run, under the name VideoPack Plus or the G7400. It really was just an enhanced version of the Odyssey II. It had a Microsoft Basic computer module add-on made for it that would not work with the original Odyssey II or VideoPack. Now, speaking of add-ons, the Odyssey II had two additional add-ons. The Voice, which was a digital voice synthesizer, somewhat like the IntelliVoice for the Intellivision, and the Chess module. This was used with the chess game, and it was necessary because the Odyssey II did not have enough memory or CPU power to make it a competitive game of chess without it. It gave the Odyssey II a second CPU and more RAM to be able to play the chess game. But as we all know, 1983 was the year of the video game crash, and it took a huge chunk out of every video game manufacturer's pockets. Magnavox was no different. With the cost of Atari's lawsuit and the sales of the system and games plummeting, Magnavox was seeing huge losses. By June of 1983, they announced that Odyssey III was put on an indefinite hold, and by March of 1984, the Odyssey II had been discontinued, with Magnavox Gaming and Odyssey Division being dissolved, bringing an end to Magnavox being a video game console manufacturer lasting 12 years in the market, the longest of any company to that point. The Odyssey II had a 6-year lifespan, from 1978 to 1984, selling more than 2 million units, and was unfortunately another victim of the video game crash. Who knows, if the crash wouldn't have happened, we might still be playing Magnavox video game consoles today.
I'll try almost anything. So when Mattel Electronics asked me to compare their Intellivision games with Atari, I gave it a try. I compared Atari baseball with Intellivision and found Intellivision played much more like real baseball. Then I compared Atari football with Intellivision. Again, Intellivision played more like the real game. In my opinion, if you try them both, there's only one conclusion you can come to. Intellivision from Mattel Electronics.
The story of the Intellivision started in 1977. At this time, Mattel had started the Mattel Electronics division to produce the handheld electronic games and started the development of the Intellivision. Mattel wanted something that was better than what the competition had at the time, so they started working with APH Technological Consulting and started shopping for a chipset for the new console. First, they worked with National Semiconductor to get a powerful chipset, but they deemed this chipset too expensive. At about the same time, APH consulted with General Instruments. They were interested in the General Instruments chipset named Gemini. The only problem with this chipset is that it didn't have reprogrammable graphics. General Instruments worked with Mattel to create a custom chipset just for Mattel's new game system. Because Mattel had basically went with National Semiconductor first, they waited 2 months before actually closing the deal with General Instruments for their new chipset. A team of engineers at Mattel, headed by David Chandler, began work on the development of the hardware. Then in 1978, David Roth of APH developed the execute program that was used to execute the game programs. Also, with a group of students from Caltech, they started designing the first games for the Intellivision. The Intellivision was debuted at the 1979 Las Vegas CES show in January. The master component system was debuted at a starting price of $165, with the soon-to-follow keyboard component at the same price of $165. At the Chicago CES show in June, those prices were actually revised to $250 for each unit. This was due to a shortage of chips that were needed for both components. In the fall of 1979, GTE started selling its own branded version of the Intellivision, licensed from Mattel, and they started selling these units in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. at its GTE stores at a price of $280. Mattel started distributing consoles to Godluck's department store with a suggested retail price of $275. It was also put into the JCPenney 1979 Christmas catalog. Also listed were 7 cartridges with the master component system being priced at $249. By 1981, 19 cartridges were produced by APH Technologies and the students from Caltech. And with the success of these cartridges, Mattel wanted to have their own in-house programmers, codenamed the Blue Sky Rangers. And to keep these programmers from being hired away by the likes of Atari, Mattel kept their identities and their work locations private. In the spring of 1983, Mattel introduced the Intellivision II, which was a smaller, compact version of the Intellivision, and it was cost reduced to save Mattel money and bring a lower price to the consumer. As we all know, the video game crash came in 1983, and Mattel saw the losses coming as well. During 1983 and 1984, most of the staff from Intellivision Electronics Division was laid off. And on November 4th, 1984, Mattel sold the Intellivision business to the INTV Corporation, which was led by former Mattel's Electronics Senior Vice President of Marketing, Terrence Valinsky. At first, INTV Corporation sold the remaining inventory of the Intellivision games and consoles. Then they produced what was known as the INTV3, a rebranded original Intellivision. This was produced until 1990, when the Intellivision finally reached the end of its lifespan. This gave the Intellivision an 11-year run with 2 different companies. Sales of the unit are vague. When Mattel had control of the company, they had sold a little less than 3 million units from 1979 to 1983. Unfortunately, I could not find sales figures for the time that the INTV Corporation sold the unit, so I'm not quite sure how many units were sold in total.
Tired of doing the same old thing every night? Well, light up those nights with Microvision, Milton Bradley's great new handheld electronic game system. Blockbuster, one of the 7 great game cartridges available, comes with the Microvision unit. Switch cartridges to connect 4. It's a real mind tease. And for fast action, there's bowling or hitting a jackpot in Vegas slots. So for new excitement, get Microvision, the programmable game system from MB Electronics.
The story of the Microvision starts in the mid-1970s. Jay Smith and his firm Smith Engineering wanted to get into the evolving video game market. This is the same Jay Smith that later developed the Vectrex. But instead of creating another home game console, he wanted to make portable games. The first game that Smith helped create was Mattel's Electronic Football. This game became an instant hit for Mattel, which got the attention of Milton Bradley. In 1978, Milton Bradley released the Ralph Baer designed Simon game, which was a huge success. After Simon's success, they wanted to get into the portable handheld market. They saw the success Smith had with the electronic football game and asked Smith Engineering to design a portable game console. Smith got to work on the project. He wanted to create a true portable game console with interchangeable game cartridges, just like the home consoles had. Due to the challenges that this brought, no company had attempted it yet. However, the biggest issue was screen technology at the time. Really, only 2 types of displays were available: vacuum fluorescent or LCD. LCD technology was still relatively new, and the biggest producer of LCD screens at the time was Hughes Aircraft. Earlier in the 1970s, Smith Engineering had started to supply Hughes with the chemical needed to make the screens. With their experience in the manufacturing process, Smith started to design their own screen for the new portable. The finished screen would be 16 by 16 pixels, being able to use all 16 in a row, unheard of at the time. Up to this point, only 3 rows could be used at once. After the screen was designed, the cartridge was next. The best way for them to do it at the time was to put the CPU inside the cartridge, because each game would be different. It would keep cost of the unit down and make it simple to design around. The actual unit only had the screen, the LCD driver circuitry, the controls, and the power components. The rest would be handled by the individual cartridges. Once the prototype was finished, they presented it to Milton Bradley, but the design was denied. It was about the size of the original Game Boy, but Milton Bradley wanted the console to be bigger, because apparently Americans like things bigger. So they redesigned the case to be bigger and more elongated. They went back to Milton Bradley, and at this time it was approved for production. After the approval, Smith got to work making games for the console. The first games which were ready by the Microvision's release were Blockbuster, Bowling, Connect 4, and Pinball. It was also around this time that there were issues obtaining the CPU, the Intel 8021 processor. With the shortages, Smith knew they could not produce enough units. So they switched over to the Texas Instruments TMS 1100. The unit had advantages and disadvantages. On the plus side, it took less voltage to power the TMS 1100, but the CPU was less powerful, and all the games had to be reprogrammed for the new processor. The Microvision was released in November of 1979 in the US, Canada, and Europe. It was a huge success for them at first, selling enough units to garner $8 million in profit in its first year of sales. By the end of 1979, 3 more games were released: Mindbuster, Star Trek Phaser Strike, and Vegas Slots. With his perceived success, Smith Engineering invested a lot of money into designing the next Microvision to replace the current one. The new console would have an unheard of 32 by 32 pixel backlit screen and have a CPU based inside the unit. But right about this time, things started to change for the Microvision. Many of the units were failing due to the screen turning completely black, known as screen rot. The manufacturing process for the screens was not the best of quality. The screens may have been contaminated during the manufacturing process, in between the layers of the LCD. This is what causes screen rot. Many of the units were being warrantied, and it was starting to cost Milton Bradley money. Then other issues started to pop up. The cartridges, which housed the CPUs, were very sensitive to static electricity. Just touching the contacts could result in the game frying. Word started to get out about the quality issues, and sales started to slump. In 1980 and 81, there were 4 more games made for the system: Baseball, Sea Duel, Alien Raiders, and Cosmic Hunter. These were the last games to be released in the US or Canada. Sometime in 1981, Smith showed Milton Bradley the new improved version of the system they had been working on, but Milton Bradley nixed it right away. This was because of the issues that the current Microvision was having, and then they were starting to get infringement lawsuits over some of the games that were being made for the system. At this point, Milton Bradley was done. They discontinued the Microvision in 1981, and there was one more game released in 1982 in Europe, Super Blockbuster. The Microvision had a 2-year lifespan, from 1979 until 1981. It sold about 200,000 units and was the first portable handheld console with interchangeable cartridges, and was the inspiration for the future Nintendo Game Boy.